The first clue that something was very wrong came at sunrise, when I found my barn filled with smoke, pink sequined curtains hanging from the rafters, and a woman in heels screaming at my pigs to stop ruining the lighting. One of them had just taken a bite out of her satin sash. Karen didn't notice me at first, but when she did, she waved dramatically and shouted, "Don't worry, we're almost done. Just needed rustic ambience." I stared at the chaos. Glitter on my hay, her daughter posing with a fake pitchfork, and a full photography crew stomping through my livestock pen, and calmly asked, "Did you just break into my barn?" Her answer, delivered with a smug toss of her blonde curls, "No, I elevated it. I'll be honest, I thought we'd already hit peak Karen months ago when she tried to ban wind chimes because they were emotionally jarring. But this was a new frontier of delusion. I'm Lucas, by the way, former tech guy turned farmer. Bought my land 6 years ago, outside the HOA boundary by about 40 feet, which apparently offends Karen on a molecular level. She's the kind of neighbor who walks into your property like it's a showroom and files a noise complaint if your rooster crows before 7 a.m. The irony? She moved here for authentic country vibes, but wants every blade of grass to be manicured like a Beverly Hills sidewalk. It started 3 days before the chaos in the barn. I was hauling feed bags when Karen strutted down my driveway wearing platform sandals and a clipboard. That clipboard always meant one thing: trouble dressed up as policy. She didn't waste time. "Lucas," she said, "I need the barn Saturday morning. My daughter's getting engaged, and we need a rustic backdrop for the announcement shoot. You'll need to clean out the pigs." I blinked. "You want to use my barn? With real animals in it?" She gave a laugh that sounded like a champagne cork getting stuck. "Of course not. You'll remove the animals. We'll bring props. Oh, and don't worry, we'll tag you in the post." There's something about the way entitled people say, "Don't worry," that instantly makes me worry. I explained, as politely as I could, that my barn wasn't for rent, wasn't a studio, and wasn't hers. She immediately pulled out her clipboard. "Under Section 4.3 of the Community Cohesion Agreement, I have the right to request use of shared structures for approved events." I looked at her, then at my barn, which sits on land I've owned since before the HOA even existed. "This structure," I said, "is not shared. It's mine. Also, I'm not in your HOA." Her eye twitched. She clearly hated hearing that. "Oh, Lucas," she said, "you can't just live next to an HOA and act like you're on some kind of sovereignty island." I thought that was the end of it. I underestimated her capacity for theatrical escalation. The next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with flyers, glossy, full-color prints featuring my barn with filters that made it look like it belonged in a bridal magazine. On the bottom was a caption, "Rustic Royalty, save the date." Karen had taken a photo of my barn from the road, slapped it on invitations, and was passing them out to the entire neighborhood. I called her. "Karen, what the hell is this?" Her voice was as fake sweet as stevia. "Oh, Lucas, you'll be thrilled. We're putting your barn on the map. Exposure like this is priceless. Besides, we've already started renting outfits." By then, I'd installed security cameras, and for good reason. The night before the photo shoot, motion sensors picked up a group of people in my yard. I checked the footage. A couple of guys in black polos with event staff on their backs were setting up lights, removing tools from the barn, and this part actually made my jaw drop, unlatching the pigpen. I bolted outside, but by the time I got there, they were gone. Just a few extension cords and a tripod left behind. My pigs were still in their pen, but someone had clearly tried to stage the place. I debated calling the cops, but I knew what Karen would say, that it was all a misunderstanding or an early arrival. So I waited. And sure enough, at sunrise, she arrived in a luxury SUV with a full production crew, hauling camera gear, props, and some poor soul in a chicken costume. When I asked how she got in, she said, "Oh, we had someone prearrange access." Translation, she broke in. I should have been furious. Instead, I got creative. While Karen tried to choreograph her daughter's engagement reveal among antique milk cans and fake bales of hay, I slipped around the back and opened the gate. 12 pigs, well-fed and curious, trotted straight into the barn and began investigating every shiny object. One went for the smoke machine. Another knocked over a ring light. By the time Karen realized what was happening, a pig had its snout in the makeup kit and 2 others were nudging her daughter into the hay. Karen screamed, "Do something," and I just shrugged. "You're the one who wanted rustic." What followed could only be described as chaos dipped in perfume and rolled in glitter. Karen screamed at the pigs. The pigs snorted and knocked over a prop fence. Someone from the crew yelled, "Save the equipment," while another slipped on hay and landed in pig manure. Karen climbed on top of a haystack like it was a sinking ship, waving her arms and yelling for someone to fix the ambience. Meanwhile, her daughter, red-faced and half-buried in straw, started yelling that she never even wanted this stupid barn. I stood outside the door, sipping my coffee and enjoying the sunrise. That's when Karen made her biggest mistake yet. She pointed at me and shouted, "You'll pay for this, Lucas! I'll get the board to condemn this place. We'll take it from you." I didn't even blink. "Try it," I said. "But make sure you smile for the camera. You're being live-streamed to the county." And just like that, the game changed. What Karen didn't know was that I had quietly installed cloud-connected surveillance after her last visit, and every bit of her glitter-fueled barn invasion had been broadcast to a private YouTube link. It had over 300 views already, including my cousin Darcy, who just happens to be a real estate lawyer with a serious grudge against HOAs. Karen froze. For the first time since she marched onto my land in heels, she looked scared. And I knew exactly what was coming next. Not peace. Not retreat. Something worse. Desperation. And Karen, when desperate, was about to go full tilt. It didn't take long for Karen to strike back. Less than an hour after the glitterpocalypse in my barn, I got an email from the HOA board with a subject line that read, "Urgent violation, community disruption." The message was a confusing mix of bold accusations and passive-aggressive phrasing, claiming I had endangered community safety by letting unsupervised livestock roam into a public event space. Public event space. She was actually trying to argue my barn, the one she trespassed into, was somehow shared property. My reply was just 2 words, "Prove it." By noon, Karen had rallied her little army. A folding table and 3 lawn chairs appeared right at the edge of my driveway. Karen sat at the head like a budget queen in a suburban Game of Thrones, flanked by 2 board members who looked as confused as they were terrified. They were holding an emergency community review session. She passed out laminated packets with color-coded bullet points, most of which were just made-up legal terms like photogenic right-of-use clause and barn aesthetics jurisdiction. A few curious neighbors wandered over. Karen tried to sway them with syrupy promises of barn yoga, pop-up picnics, and an annual farm-to-table gala hosted right in front of my tractor. The problem was, none of these people actually liked her. I stood on my porch, coffee in one hand and a donut in the other, as Karen launched into a speech about elevating property values through visual unity. She waved toward my barn like she was unveiling a monument. One of the HOA guys asked, "Wait, do we actually have the right to vote on his barn?" Karen snapped, "Of course. It's within our visual perimeter." That's when I hit play on my Bluetooth speaker, which echoed across the field with the full audio from the night before, her crew trespassing, her voice saying, "Don't worry, we'll just sneak in." She froze. The HOA guys exchanged glances, then slowly closed their packets. Karen wasn't giving up. She pivoted to a new strategy. By that evening, I got another official-looking letter. This time from Animal Control. Someone had filed a complaint against me for endangering domestic animals and maintaining unsafe enclosures. I didn't need a crystal ball to know who filed it. The next morning, a white county truck pulled into my drive. A guy in boots and a baseball cap stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Lucas," he said. "Got a report of pigs on the loose and suspected livestock abuse." I pointed toward the pen, where the pigs were napping in fresh straw, with a sprinkler running nearby and a classical music playlist softly playing from a barn speaker. The inspector looked around, scratched his beard, and said, "Yeah, this looks better than most people's houses." He spent the next 20 minutes touring my setup, petting the pigs, and asking about their diet. I offered him a cold bottle of water. As he left, he handed me a form, "Inspection passed with commendation for exceptional ethical conditions." But the best part? He left Karen with a $300 fine for trespassing, disrupting livestock, and unauthorized event activity near animals. Her reaction? She stood at the edge of her lawn, screaming, "He weaponized pigs! Who does that?" A teenager biking past replied, "Apparently, someone awesome." The next day, she went even further off the rails. A large envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside were printed copies of old photographs, sepia-toned images of a barn that looked vaguely like mine. She'd sent a petition to the county historical office, trying to claim my barn was a heritage site under community management. She even included a forged letter from the township historian, which I immediately recognized as a document she probably made in Microsoft Word using Comic Sans. The photos? Obvious fakes. In one, the barn door had a visible Tesla logo photoshopped over it. I called the county records office, and within a day, a rep from the zoning commission called back laughing. "We actually have your original blueprints and survey maps," he said. "Not only is it not a heritage structure, it was built in 2017, and your name is on every permit." He paused. "Also, whoever submitted the petition is now under investigation for document fraud." I asked if I should worry about Karen. His answer was perfect. "Only if you're allergic to glitter and bad ideas." Karen must have sensed the pressure closing in, because her next move was straight out of a reality TV meltdown. She showed up at my property line with a man in a button-down shirt and khakis who introduced himself as a creative consultant for visual development. Translation: he was a set designer. Karen, still uninvited, walked him around the edge of my property, pointing at trees, the fence, even my old wheelbarrow. "This is where the rose arch goes," she said. "We'll need that tractor moved. Too industrial." I just leaned against the gate and said, "Ma'am, you are describing things that belong to me." She turned to her consultant and said, "See? He's being difficult. Like always." The guy looked between us and asked, "Wait, so you don't have permission to be here?" She froze. "It's an informal understanding." The consultant backed away slowly and said, "Yeah, I don't do lawsuits," then got in his car and left without even shaking her hand. I figured by now the storm had passed. I underestimated Karen's capacity for reinvention. Later that night, I got a tip from my cousin Darcy. She'd been following everything through the livestream archive and casually mentioned, "Did you see her new Instagram story?" I pulled it up and nearly dropped my phone. Karen had launched a new online campaign titled Barn to Bridal, a socialite's vision, where she announced a special fashion gala coming soon, complete with a ticket sales link. The event was scheduled to take place at a charming rural venue with photos of my barn all over the page. Tickets were $75, with VIP packages that included a photo op with real farm animals. I scrolled in disbelief. She was literally selling admission to an event on my property without telling me. I showed Darcy, who leaned back in her chair and said, "Oh, she's cooked. Keep your camera on. We're going to need footage." I didn't argue. Karen wasn't just delusional anymore. She was actively committing fraud. That's when I decided to let her keep digging. I locked my gates, double-checked my security feeds, and set up a new pig feeding schedule to coincide with any suspicious movement. The pigs, bless them, had become accidental bodyguards. They liked routines, and I figured if anything broke that pattern, like sudden guests or flash photography, I'd know immediately. And knowing Karen, she wasn't done. Not even close. I could feel it. Her desperation was just beginning to bloom, like a poorly planted shrub determined to invade the whole yard. And the more she pushed, the more fun it was going to be to watch her unravel in high definition. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when I heard the unmistakable sound of tires crunching gravel. I looked out my window and saw Karen pulling up again, this time in a black SUV with tinted windows, adorned with gold decals that read Executive Producer. She stepped out dressed in a sequin blazer, holding a clipboard in one hand and a megaphone in the other. Behind her, a minivan unloaded a team of people lugging camera equipment, extension cords, wardrobe racks, and even what looked like a fog machine. I watched them set up with the precision of a reality TV crew, only it was on the wrong set. My land. I opened the front door slowly, trying to savor the dramatic moment like I was in one of those courtroom dramas. Karen spotted me and immediately lifted the megaphone. "We're filming today," she declared as if that was all it took to claim someone else's barn. "Try to stay out of the shots unless you're bringing snacks." I crossed my arms and said, "Try to leave before the cops arrive." She paused and laughed like I'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Lucas, you're being so stubborn. This is for everyone's benefit. We're creating something beautiful. Rustic yet aspirational." One of the crew members walked up to me and tried to hand me a waiver to sign. I didn't even read it. I just pointed to the private property sign I had nailed above the barn door in 6-inch bold letters. "No contract, no permission, no access," I said plainly. He shrugged and turned back toward Karen, who was too busy adjusting a floral crown on her actress model to care. I stepped back inside my house, grabbed my phone, and started recording everything again. An hour later, Karen went live on social media, proudly announcing that they were beginning the first day of filming for Barn to Bridal, her self-produced pilot for what she claimed was going to be picked up by Netflix or Hallmark or someone classy like that. She introduced the cast, described the premise, something about city girls finding love through farming, and showed off the set, which of course was my barn and my property. I sent the link to Darcy, who replied in under 10 seconds with, "She's toast. Screenshot everything. I'm sending this to my friend at the county permit office." I thought she'd fold under the pressure when she saw me recording her crew from the porch, but no. Karen doubled down. That afternoon, I found velvet ropes lining the gravel path to my barn. They were connected to gold stanchions, like we were suddenly hosting a premiere. The sheer audacity of it almost made me respect her. Almost. I followed the rope down to the barn where 2 girls in cowboy hats were practicing lines. Karen was barking directions like she was directing Gone with the Wind. She turned around, spotted me, and actually had the gall to wave. "I'm making your barn famous," she called. "You're welcome." Instead of arguing, I just pulled out my phone and started narrating. Today on Karen, the unauthorized musical, our lead character attempts to build a media empire using theft and delusion. That clip went up on my private YouTube channel where only a few friends, Darcy, and a couple of off-duty cops followed the saga. I figured it wouldn't hurt to have the law watching when the inevitable implosion happened. Later that evening, just when I thought I'd seen the last of her antics for the day, I heard a loud crash. I rushed out to find that Karen had tried to set up a decorative fence made of fake wood panels, but one of her crew accidentally hit the side with a dolly cart. The whole thing collapsed, taking down one of the velvet ropes and spooking 2 pigs in the process. The pigs, in their usual curious way, walked right into the chaos. One nudged the fog machine. Another went straight for the snack table and knocked over a tub of hummus. One of the models screamed and leapt onto a hay bale, still in full makeup and heels. It was chaos again, but this time in slow motion and caught from 3 camera angles. Karen, dripping with sweat and holding a microphone, turned to her assistant and screamed, "This is supposed to be a controlled environment." Her assistant, to her credit, just handed her a napkin and walked away. That's when I noticed something new. Parked a little ways down the road was a gray sedan I didn't recognize. A man stepped out, wearing a badge around his neck and carrying a folder. He approached me and introduced himself as Mr. Carlton from the county planning department. I smiled like I'd just been handed a gift basket. "Mind if I take a look around?" he asked. We got an anonymous tip about an unpermitted commercial production operating in a non-zoned area. I led him right to the barn. He asked questions, took photos, and even asked one of the crew members who had hired them. They all pointed to Karen. When he finally approached her, she was halfway through trying to film a candid reaction with her daughter, who looked more and more like she wanted to crawl into the hay and disappear. Carlton asked for her permit. She blinked. "It's digital," she said. "Somewhere in my inbox." He asked for her to pull it up. She opened her phone, scrolled, fumbled, and then tried to distract him with a sample video reel. Carlton wasn't buying it. "Ma'am, I have to issue you a citation for illegal commercial activity and for falsifying permit data. Also, you forged the landowner's signature." Karen gasped. "That's ridiculous. Lucas and I had an understanding." I said, "Yeah. I understand that you're a lunatic." That night, I reviewed the footage with Darcy over a video call. She laughed so hard she dropped her wine glass. "She really brought a fog machine to a pig barn?" she asked, wiping tears from her eyes. "I don't know whether to press charges or pitch this to a streaming service ourselves." The idea wasn't terrible, but I wasn't done yet. If Karen thought this was her finale, she had no idea what was coming next. Because the gala? The one she was selling tickets to? It was still happening. She hadn't cancelled it, which meant she planned to return. Bigger. Louder. Even more unhinged. I had 1 week to prepare. And if she thought a few pigs and a county citation would stop her, I was about to show her what real rural chaos looked like. The morning of the so-called bridal gala felt like the calm before a hurricane, except instead of wind, rain, and lightning, I was expecting perfume clouds, overpriced handbags, and a meltdown in glitter. Karen hadn't cancelled the event, despite the permit violation and the threat of legal action. In fact, if anything, she had doubled down. Her event page was still up, the countdown still ticking, and the RSVP list now boasted over 200 community influencers, which, judging by their usernames, were mostly her sock puppet accounts and a few unfortunate yoga moms she roped in with promises of a free cheese board. What she didn't know was that I had no intention of trying to stop her anymore. In fact, I was counting on her to show up, because everything was in place for the finale. The first guests arrived around 10 a.m. They came in Range Rovers, Teslas, and a suspicious number of rented golf carts. Most of them looked completely bewildered as they followed the directions Karen had emailed out, which led them through the front gate of my property. The signs I had installed the night before read, "Private Property. Event in Progress. Enter at your own risk," in friendly script, but clearly none of them bothered to read the fine print. Or the pigs. They didn't read those either. I had let my pigs out an hour earlier, after a hearty breakfast of apples and oats, and they were roaming happily around the property like little pink landmines of chaos. Karen arrived fashionably late, of course. Her SUV screeched to a stop in the gravel, and she stepped out like a queen descending from a chariot. She wore a long, flowing gown that looked like it had been assembled from sheer curtains and craft store feathers, and she carried a bouquet of fake roses that sparkled unnaturally in the sunlight. Her assistant trailed behind her with a makeup bag and a clipboard. As Karen made her way toward the barn, she surveyed the scene with a proud smile, completely ignoring the pigs that were already sniffing at the guests' shoes. One child tried to pet one and got gently nudged into a puddle. The mother screamed. Karen just called it immersive realism. I waited until she was mid-speech. She had gathered her followers, maybe 30 people at most, near the barn entrance and was launching into a dramatic opening monologue about the spiritual journey from urban stress to rural rebirth. Her hands were outstretched. Her eyes were misty. Her voice echoed slightly thanks to a portable speaker she'd set up. That's when I activated the first phase of my plan. I had rigged a remote control tied to a small pulley system I'd installed behind the barn doors. When I pressed the button, a bale of hay with a giant red bough on it rolled out onto the grass, stopping at Karen's feet. Taped to the top was a laminated sign that said, "Congratulations! You're standing in the splash zone." She barely had time to read it before the second part triggered. A hidden spout connected to my apple mash tank released a slow, syrupy stream of fermented fruit mash down a chute, straight into the pig pen. The scent hit them instantly, and within seconds they charged. 12 pigs, ears flapping and snouts twitching, came barreling out from behind the barn and ran directly into the crowd. Guests scattered like marbles on a dance floor. High heels flew. A man lost his sunglasses. Someone dropped an entire charcuterie board. Karen screamed and tried to leap out of the way, but her dress caught on the decorative fence she'd installed, and she toppled backward into a bucket of paint she'd left out as part of her art installation. Her assistant tried to help her up and got face-planted by a pig who mistook her handbag for food. The chaos was beautiful. It was unhinged. It was cinematic. Cameras were everywhere. Not just the ones from Karen's crew, but the phones of every single guest who had showed up, now recording in disbelief as pigs tore through fake floral arrangements and people tried to outrun mud-splattered livestock. But it wasn't just the guests filming. I had invited a few special people of my own. 3 reporters from the local news station were there, wearing boots and grinning from ear to ear. They had caught wind of the barn drama thanks to Darcy, and they came ready. One of them was live-streaming the event as Karen shrieked something about sabotage and livestock terrorism. The best moment came when Karen finally got to her feet and tried to confront me. She stomped through the muck, dress trailing like a soggy parade float, makeup streaked across her face like war paint. "You ruined everything," she shrieked. "This was supposed to be my brand launch." I shrugged and said, "It looks like you launched something all right." Straight into the pigsty. Her eyes widened like she might actually throw something, but then she spotted the news crew. Instantly, she turned, fixed her hair, and tried to put on a smile. "There's been a terrible mistake," she told them. "We were just filming a charity event when this man unleashed wild animals on us." The reporter raised an eyebrow and asked, "Is that why you charged $75 a ticket to film on land you don't own?" Karen froze. For the first time, she had no comeback. No clipboard. No megaphone. No script. Just mud, pigs, and the cold realization that her reputation was being broadcast to hundreds, maybe thousands, of viewers in real time. Her daughter, who had arrived late, took one look at the scene and turned right back around, muttering something about never asking for this life. A group of guests were already leaving, some laughing, some furious, some genuinely impressed by the pigs. As if on cue, the new HOA president, Ellie, who'd been elected the week prior after the rest of the board resigned in disgrace, pulled up in her pickup and walked over with a folder. "Karen," she said flatly, "we've received multiple complaints about this event. You've violated no less than 9 regulations. And I'm here to let you know your request for expedited relocation has been denied. Enjoy your extended stay." Karen looked like she was going to faint. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. That night, I cleaned up the mess with a hose and some help from the 4-H kids I'd invited as backup. They had loved every second of the chaos and even started calling the pigs by names like Fashion Killer and Haute Snoucher. I gave them some leftover props as souvenirs and promised them they'd always have access to my barn, for real events. We lit a bonfire, roasted marshmallows, and watched the footage on a projector screen strapped to the side of the barn. Every laugh, every scream, every ridiculous moment played out like the ending of a perfect comedy. Karen didn't show her face again for the rest of the week. Rumor has it she tried to rebrand her online presence, but the internet had already turned her gala into a viral sensation. Clips titled "Pigs Crash Wedding Shoot" and "Karen Gets Hog Wild" flooded social media. Someone even auto-tuned her yelling into a remix track. By the time the sun set, one thing was clear. She'd wanted a spotlight. She got one. Just not the way she planned. A week after the fiasco, my barn was back to normal. The pigs were happy, the land was calm, and the glitter had finally stopped showing up in the oddest places. Life was rolling back into its regular rhythm, the kind of rhythm that made farming peaceful again, until I checked my phone one morning and saw my face plastered across several viral thumbnails on YouTube. Farmer unleashes pigs on Karen's bridal shoot, one read. Another just said, Barnageddon, in giant flaming letters with a pig photoshopped holding a bouquet in its mouth. Somehow, someone had edited the chaos into a short film with dramatic music and fake slow motion. And it had over 2 million views. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or call a lawyer. Instead, I called Darcy. She answered with a, "Took you long enough," like she'd been waiting for my call. She said I had two options: get mad or monetize it. Apparently, someone had uploaded the event footage to a content farm, but since my cameras had caught everything and I owned the original footage, I had legal claim. Darcy had already submitted takedown notices and launched an official channel using the clip. Within 48 hours, our version had 500,000 views. The comments section was a mess of support, memes, and surprisingly enthusiastic pig fans. The viral fame snowballed. A podcast invited me on to talk about Karen culture and agricultural boundary disputes. A rural lifestyle magazine asked if I'd be their Farmer of the Month. A company that made novelty mugs emailed me to pitch a collaboration. The first mock-up said, "Don't poke the pigs." Or the farmer. And yes, I ordered 10 of them immediately. But the biggest surprise came in the form of an email titled, Barnflix Opportunity. At first, I thought it was a scam. Then I saw the sender's domain and nearly dropped my phone. A mid-level producer from a streaming service was interested in turning the story into a short docu-series. Apparently, outrageous HOA stories were trending, and they wanted the full scoop: Karen, the pigs, the gala, everything. I didn't respond right away. I needed to think. I wasn't chasing fame. I just wanted my land, my animals, and my peace. But the truth was, Karen had stirred up something so absurd, so completely entertaining, that people couldn't stop watching. And if that meant exposing how entitled and reckless some HOAs had become, maybe it was worth it. Before I could make a decision, though, another twist hit. Karen made a comeback. She reappeared with an apology video. It was filmed in front of a field of sunflowers, possibly rented, and featured soft piano music and scripted tears. She claimed she'd been under a lot of pressure and had misjudged the tone of the community. She said she'd grown to respect the values of rural life, and even adopted a pig. I could barely contain myself. The pig in her video looked completely CGI. And to top it off, she mispronounced the word, agriculture, twice. The comments on her video didn't hold back. Viewers called her out for insincerity, for lying about her intentions, and for the sudden turnaround after weeks of entitlement. Someone dug up her earlier live streams and stitched together a brutal comparison montage showing her demanding my barn versus her humble rebrand. It went viral too. Karen's attempt at image recovery fell apart faster than one of her fake fences. Sponsors she'd once bragged about quietly vanished from her pages. Her follower count tanked. She tried to pivot to a baking channel, but the only thing she was cooking was embarrassment. Meanwhile, I decided to use the attention for something better. I partnered with the local 4-H club and the county animal shelter to host an event at the barn. This time with actual permission and no fog machines. We called it Pigs, Pies, and Peace. It was simple: pet the pigs, eat homemade pies, and enjoy a drama-free day. Families showed up with their kids, local musicians played bluegrass, and a few folks even came in pig costumes just for fun. The whole thing raised money for animal care, and for the first time in weeks, the barn was filled with joy instead of chaos. Ellie from the HOA came too. She made a short speech about restoring community respect, and even helped serve apple cider. She also confirmed in front of everyone that Karen's attempt to force HOA governance onto my property had officially been declared null. The board voted unanimously to amend their charter so that stunts like Karen's couldn't happen again. I shook her hand and thanked her, and she whispered with a smirk, "If she tries anything else, I've got the footage backed up twice." Darcy, never one to miss a party, flew in that evening. She brought with her a custom banner that read, "Welcome to the pigpen, Karen." We hung it across the barn and took group photos beneath it. She also handed me a framed copy of the cease and desist letter we'd sent Karen weeks ago, now signed and sealed. "A trophy," she said, "for surviving the wildest HOA story in the county." I told her I'd hang it next to my grandfather's antique shovel. He'd have appreciated the chaos. As night fell and the last few guests headed home, I sat on the barn steps with a pig curled up beside me, the stars above clear and sharp. It was finally quiet. No cameras, no shouting, no sequins fluttering in the wind. Just me, the land, and the peace I'd earned back. That peace, however, didn't last long. The next morning, I got a delivery. A package addressed from Karen's lawyer. Inside was a letter stating that Karen was attempting to sue me for emotional distress, brand defamation, and something called unauthorized pig deployment. I laughed for a solid 5 minutes, took a photo of the letter, and sent it to Darcy. Her response? "Perfect. Now we counter." Turns out, the footage of her event, combined with her forged documents and trespassing, gave us more than enough leverage. Darcy drafted a motion to not only dismiss the case, but to pursue a defamation suit of our own. Karen's lawyer, likely realizing just how bad the situation was, withdrew the claim within 3 days. It was over. For real this time. Months passed. The internet found new scandals to obsess over. Karen quietly moved out of the neighborhood and into a rental 2 towns over. Her social media presence fizzled out. And me? I built a second barn. Smaller, cozier, but equipped with a tiny viewing room where we loop the chaos footage for visiting friends. The 4-H kids call it the Pigflix room. It even has popcorn. I never sought revenge. I didn't need to. Karen did all the work herself. All I did was make sure the pigs were fed, the cameras were rolling, and the truth came out. And in the end, it wasn't about barns or pigs or even HOA nonsense. It was about standing your ground with dignity, knowing when to push back, and letting pigs do what pigs do best. Run free, 'cause a little chaos, and remind everyone that if you come charging into someone's life uninvited, you'd better be ready for the mud.